Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. Now, Britney Spears has been on the channel a couple times here for a couple of different analyses in regards to her conservatorship. So here recently there was a court hearing in which Britney Spears was able to give a testimony in regards to her condition and her feelings towards said conservatorship. Somebody leaked some audio for that, and that has been passed around on the internet a fair bit. And then also Lynn Spears, Britney's sister, released an Instagram Live video recently. We're going to be analyzing the body language during that Instagram Live, but more on that in a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro. So for those of you who don't know what the entire situation is, it's all over the internet. There are a number of good videos to be able to go and watch on that. Today we'll be focusing on the nonverbal communication, but what we're going to do first is listen to Britney Spears herself as she spoke under oath in a courtroom in regards to her family's involvement with her conservatorship and her genuine feelings about that. We'll talk about that for a little bit, and then we'll watch the Instagram Live that her sister released here just recently, and we'll see. We'll kind of compare and go back and forth on that, and we'll talk about everything at the very end. So let's go ahead and watch this all the way through, listen and watch this all the way through, and then we'll just go from there. How's that sound? I mean, you have to say yes, so let's go.
Not only did my family not do a goddamn thing, my dad was all for it. Anything that happened to me had to be approved by my dad. My whole family did nothing. I'm telling you again because I'm not lying. I want to feel heard, and I'm telling you this again so maybe you can understand the depth and the degree and the damage that they did to me back then. I want changes, and I want changes going forward. I deserve changes, and maybe I'm wrong, and that's why I didn't want to say any of this to anybody, to the public, because I thought people would make fun of me or laugh at me and say, she's lying, she's got everything, she's Britney Spears. I'm not lying. I just want my life back, and it's been 13 years, and it's enough. All I want is to own my money for this to end, and my boyfriend to drive me in his fucking car. And I would honestly like to sue my family, to be totally honest with you. It's not fair they're telling me lies about me openly. Even my family, they do interviews to anyone they want on news stations. My own family doing interviews and talking about the situation and making me feel so stupid. And I can't say one thing.
Okay, so that's the audio clip that we're working with. Now the full audio clip, like I said, is all over the internet. So just search it and you can listen to the entire thing. It's 23-ish minutes long. There's another video that's like 40 minutes long, but it has some more stuff on the other side. So go and watch any of those videos if you want to be able to hear the entire testimony from Britney, but those are in relation to her family. She made it quite clear what she feels in regards to her family. Now, this portion that she was reading was fully scripted. You can hear her in various areas of this testimony as she's trying to navigate what she had written down before, and she's not sure exactly what she was meaning, and so on and so forth. But we know it's scripted, so that means that it's going to be much harder to be able to decipher deceit based specifically on the audio. There are some areas where she does have some cutouts, some hesitations, some verbal stutterings and stammerings, and they were odd, but in my opinion, and this is just my opinion based off of the small channel of verbal analysis that nonverbal people have to be able to train in, based off of that small amount, I do believe that she was being genuine with her emotions, maybe a little bit more inflammatory than needed, but understandably so, especially for somebody in her position. So her audio sounded quite genuine, as best as it can, being, well, scripted. So from here on out, we're going to go ahead and watch her sister's Instagram Live, which is in response to fans, I believe, calling her out on some things. So let's see what happens, and then we'll talk about the nonverbal communication of it, and then we'll give opinions at the very, very end.
Hey everybody, I just want to take a second to address a few things. The only reason I haven't before is because I felt like until my sister was able to speak for herself and say what she felt she needed to say publicly, that it wasn't my place and it wasn't the right thing to do. But now that she's very clearly spoken and said what she needed to say, I feel like I can follow her lead and say what I feel I need to say. I think it's extremely clear that since the day I was born, I've only loved, adored, and supported my sister. I mean, this is my freaking big sister before any of this bullshit. I don't care if she wants to run away to a rainforest and have a zillion babies in the middle of nowhere, or if she wants to come back and dominate the world the way she has so many times before. Because I have nothing to gain or lose either way. This situation does not affect me either way, because I am only her sister who is only concerned about her happiness. I've made a very conscious choice in my life to only participate in her life as her sister, as an aunt to those boys. Maybe I didn't support her the way the public would like me to, with a hashtag on a public platform, but I can assure you that I've supported my sister long before there was a hashtag, and I'll support her long after. Note that. I mean, I've worked since I was 9 years old. I paid my own freaking bills since I was 10 years old. Not that I owe the public anything, because my sister knows I love and support her. That's the only person I owe anything to. I'm not my family. I am my own person. I'm speaking for myself. I'm so proud of her for using her voice. I'm so proud of her for requesting new counsel, like I told her to do many years ago. Oh, not on a big public platform, but just in a personal conversation between two sisters. So I'm very proud that she's taken that step. If ending the conservatorship, if flying to Mars, or whatever the hell else she wants to do to be happy, I support that 100%, because I support my sister. I love my sister, always have, always will, as long as she's happy. So let's keep praying. That's all.
All right. So that's a little tiny short Instagram live that Jamie Lynn Spears released here very, very recently. So some things about her nonverbal communication that stick out to me, and we'll go back through this, but speaking on her baseline, she has some certain facial movements that are regular. For instance, on her specific face, her upper lip maintains a fairly motionless state. It doesn't move a whole bunch, so that could be due to maybe a cosmetic kind of procedure, or it could just be how her muscles move. Regardless, that's something that I've made note of. You have to be able to keep track of that. She also has a fairly active head baseline, so she moves her head around a fair bit, and this is across multiple different videos. She's very active with her head movements, so maybe we might be able to see some sort of seepage come from there, but we do have to keep in mind that she is very active with her head movements, regardless of what the topic is. Regardless, I was able to establish a rough baseline as to who she is non-verbally. Now, as you could hear, she quite literally seems to counteract what Britney was saying. Now, Britney said her family. She never specifically mentioned Jamie, but she also didn't specifically not mention Jamie, if that makes sense. It seems as though she wanted to clump the entire family together, and Jamie Lynn, the sister, not Jamie the dad, Jamie Lynn, the sister, wants to be able to maybe cut herself out of that statement that we heard Britney offer before. So this is interesting. It seems as though Jamie is saying that she had nothing but support, and it seems as though Britney is saying that her entire family more or less leached off of her for years and was very complacent with a toxic conservatorship. So that's where we're at with this narrative. So now we get to be able to go through her nonverbal communication, Jamie Lynn's nonverbal communication, and see what we can see, if there's any emotional seepage or possible indicators of deceit throughout the video.
Hey everybody, I just want to take a second to address a few things.
So first thing that I will point out is that her tone is very soft and it's fairly low. And that can be an indicator of an emotional state, and it can be an indicator of the emotional state that's appropriate for the video. People will oftentimes adapt that. So with a softer, lower tone like this, it can be an indicator of anger. Intense rage will oftentimes drop a tone. Not all the time, but it is also a possible indicator of sadness in that kind of emotional state. So both of those would make a decent amount of sense in the context that it's given. There's not enough to be able to go off of quite yet on that, but let's continue watching.
The only reason I haven't before is because I felt like until my sister was able to speak for herself and say what she felt she needed to say publicly, that it wasn't my place and it wasn't the right thing to do.
So what I will note is that she breaks eye contact during this time where she's explaining why she's never spoken up before, so on and so forth. And then you could see a fair bit of activity coming in onto her arm. This is playing up into her shoulder, so it could be an indicator of insecurity or insincerity, something around those lines, but it could also just be her gesturing outside of the screen. Regardless, it doesn't really feel like a very good excuse for why she's remained completely silent in this, and it does back up Britney's side of things, where she says that her family stayed completely silent on the entire thing, and her dad really actually supported it. So from this, based off of that, if we're to believe Britney, and what we've seen a little bit from Jamie so far, is that Jamie's not being fully honest with that excuse. Either that or it's just a smaller, lamer excuse than what Britney's situation kind of demands. That's just where we are so far. Let's continue.
But now that she's very clearly spoken and said what she needed to say, I feel like I can...
She does a fair number of lip compressions, and this pops up throughout this entire video regularly. Now, lip compressions can often mean a biting back of emotion, usually negative emotion, or words related to negative emotions. It's usually biting back some form of extra thought added to, and it's rarely positive. So we can more or less group that in with that universal tell of a lip compression, meaning possible biting back of negative emotions, which does make sense in this context. It's a pretty weighty video, so having that pop up there would make sense for both sides. It could make sense that she's being truthful and it's just a negative, weighty conversation that she's having, ergo the tells, or it could be also that she's trying to bite back what would be considered the truth. That's a little bit more nuanced, if that makes sense. So let's continue building this character sketch.
Follow her lead and say what I feel I need to say. I think it's extremely clear that since the day I was born, I've only loved, adored, and supported my sister.
I'm not certain about that. She has a pretty substantial lip compression again, which we just went over, but then she also breaks eye contact in this look off to the side look, which seems dismissive. It's not necessarily that she's recollecting an auditory or visual memory or something along those lines, but it does seem dismissive in regards to her love to her sister, which she's only ever had love for her sister. And for those of us who are siblings, that should mostly be true, that we always only have love for our sibling, and that could be the case here, but she does have some odd nonverbal patterns during that time, so I'm keeping note of it as it continues on.
I mean, this is my freaking big sister before any of this bullshit. I don't care if she wants to run away to a rainforest and have a zillion babies in the middle of nowhere, or if she wants to come back and dominate the world the way she has so many times before. Because I have nothing to gain or lose either way.
I don't think that's true either. So it's interesting that verbally speaking during this part, Jamie says some sort of crazy-ish sounding plan that Britney could do, or she could stay and dominate. And then she says either way, either of those two options, as if those were the only two options. Now, is this scripted and that well planned out that she gives two very specific options, and if it's either of those, then she's okay with either of those? Maybe. It doesn't really seem that way. This seems to be fairly unscripted. So I think that this is just her giving examples. But then we have to ask, why does she give such an out there example for what her sister might do? Perhaps Britney has brought it up in a private conversation, something along those lines that could inspire that. We're not sure, but it is odd. It is odd that she attributes a strange action to Britney. Why would she say that unless she has some sort of reason for it, be it she believes Britney might do something crazy, or Britney has said that she'll do something crazy. We're not quite certain here, but it is an odd verbal pattern that she's putting a sense of craziness onto Britney's side of planning. And then she says that it doesn't matter to me either way, I don't benefit from it either way. And I don't necessarily believe that's true. Maybe not directly benefiting from it, but if the family is doing well, then everybody in the family is more likely to do well, meaning that she'll probably do better if Britney's doing better, so on and so forth. So with a logical progression on that, that could be a point where she's not really being honest, but maybe not intentionally being deceitful. I hope that makes sense. Let's continue.
This situation does not affect me either way because I am only her sister who is only concerned about her happiness. I've made a very conscious choice in my life to only participate in her life as her sister, as an aunt to those boys.
This bothers me right here because she goes to have emotion come up in her voice, but it's not reflected remotely in her nonverbal communication except for the conscious and false wiping of tears or something along those lines. The argument could be made that when she's doing this thing, that there's suddenly an itch. Maybe she just had the need to touch her nose there. It could be a coincidence, but I don't believe so considering the context. With the context of what she just said and then trying to wipe away a tear, there's not a tear. There's no sadness reflected anywhere else in her nonverbal communication aside from her tone that you can consciously and easily change. So with that display, it feels a little bit manipulative that she's trying to really win the audience over to sympathize with her in her position of only wanting to be a good aunt to the boys, even though Britney didn't exclude her from being in the family who was terrible to her. I hope that makes sense. So let's just keep this all in mind as we continue forward.
Maybe I didn't support her the way the public would like me to, with a hashtag on.
With this, we could see a lot more sass coming from Jamie during this part, and that is characterized by the increase in tone and increase in pitch. It's a sharper tone, and the pitch has increased. Now, this can indicate anger. Not the rage, the cold, dark rage that we mentioned before, where a tone will drop severely, but more of an actual anger rage, an outburst of rage, which would be the higher pitch and the sharper tone. So with that coming out, that makes sense. Also, her head movements have moved into this more attitude-based movement, which is synchronized with what her tone is saying. And she also has some shrugs coming in there with a maybe I should have done this or blah, blah, blah. And it's odd to be able to see this defensiveness come out. Now, considering the context, I'm betting that Jamie is receiving a fair bit of heat from Britney Spears fans in relation to what Britney said. Because the easy way to be able to do that would be to take Britney at her word and see the evidence that we've seen before on the internet and say that, okay, so Britney is in a rough way and she's calling out her family as being terrible towards her. And she even wants to go so far as to sue them. And so with that sort of verbiage coming from Britney, I'm sure that Jamie's receiving some heat. So that could be the reason for the defensiveness and the anger and the attitude. Let's see if there's anything else that pops up.
A public platform, but I can assure you that I've supported my sister long before there was a hashtag, and I'll support her long after. Note that. I mean, I've worked since I was...
So she's pretty angry here, and she's holding gaze pretty steadily, and she has some micro expressions of disgust slipping out during this time, and that is likely in relation to the people who are challenging Jamie on this. And then she says, and that's a fact, and then she's going to dive off into how, here in a second, like we watched, how she's made her own money and living since she was 9 years old, which I don't know her history, so I can't really fact check that, but I mean, there are laws in the US to prevent child labor, but people bend laws oftentimes. So maybe that's true, but it is odd that she locks eye contact during this time. Before this, she has been looking away in various areas, and it seems more natural, but at this point, she really locks in. And that could be because she's trying to hammer her point home pretty strongly, which that would be a way to communicate that more so when you lock eyes with somebody, or when she's locking eyes with the lens, so to speak, then that's more attention grabbing. You pay more attention at that point. Or it could be that this part might not be as true and this is a compensation. Now, there are a number of misconceptions about eye contact and liars. There's the saying that if you look all over and you can't look at a person's eyes, then you're probably lying, or if you only look at their eyes, then you're probably lying, and none of those are necessarily completely true. It really boils down to baseline. And from her baseline, which we just mentioned, she's looking all over regularly, and then on this point she locks in. And when she locks in on this, it kind of counteracts what Britney said earlier. So we're at a she said and she said situation. Who do we believe? Well, let's continue on and we can talk about that at the end.
I was 9 years old. I paid my own freaking bills since I was 10 years old. Not that I owe the public anything, because my sister knows I love and support her. That's the only person I owe anything to. I'm not my family. I'm my own person. I'm speaking for myself. I'm so proud of her.
The lip pursing, the looking off to the side, these are all agitation symbols. She's showing that she's very frustrated in regards to what people are calling her out for. And right now there's not enough nonverbal seepage to be able to say that she's for sure lying or she's for sure telling the truth. So we'll look at this at the very end, like I've been saying, at the very end with everything considered into context and her baseline to be able to hopefully get a more accurate read. Now, since this is a YouTube video and this is based off of her Instagram Live and other footage found of her on on the internet, this is going to have a reasonable chance of inaccuracy, as all video analysis does. So in person, you have the opportunity to be able to ask important questions, push in various areas, and slowly weasel your way in psychologically to who they are non-verbally. With a video, you don't have that opportunity. You really just have to work with what you have, and that decreases your accuracy by simple logical processing. You don't have the opportunity to push. So with that in mind, this is going to be around the 75, maybe to 85% accuracy. There's going to be a distinct chance of a misread on this just due to its very nature. So I'm going to try to counteract that and consider as best as I can all of the facets that I have available to me, and then we'll work from there. So let's just keep watching.
For using her voice. I'm so proud of her for requesting new counsel like I told her to do many years ago. Oh, not on a big public platform, but just in a personal conversation between two sisters. So I'm very proud that she's taken that step. If ending the conservatorship, if flying to Mars or whatever the hell else she wants to do to be happy, I support that. 100%.
So we're still seeing some odd movements from her head, which, like I said, that's part of her baseline. During this time, the only thing that I can really fall back on with the head movements is that the smaller the head movement, the less likely it is to be consciously controlled. That's a loose rule for this. You can control bigger, broader movements more easily than you can tiny micro movements. So during that time, she had some smaller head movements, no, while saying I only fully support and so on and so forth, which could be an indicator of possible deceit. There's not enough around that to be able to say, oh, obviously, for sure, you would like to be able to work in context with the rest of the patterns that she's presenting. But off of that little tiny blip there, not enough to really say. It is still a red flag, though, and she has been compiling some red flags throughout this entire thing, which hopefully by the time we're done, we'll have enough to be able to have an idea of what she's feeling. So let's see.
Because I support my sister. I love my sister, always have, always will, as long as she's happy. So, let's keep praying. That's all.
Okay, so characterized throughout that is anger. That's what Jamie's feeling was from that defensiveness, aggression, anger. All of those in relation to her relationship with Britney. And at the end of this, not based off of her nonverbal communication, because her nonverbal communication is just a small, thin slice of what we can see here, considering the context, considering the previous actions of the family, considering the current actions of the family, this feels to me like Jamie's trying to save some face for her lack of backbone in standing up for her sister publicly. Because there was so much happening there. And this could have been a respect thing, like she was saying. Maybe she didn't want to step up and say anything because it could fan the flames, so to speak, which is possible, especially on the internet. But she seemed to be fairly inactive completely. And when Britney comes out in court and is willing to swear that her entire family more or less abandoned her to this terrible conservatorship, that seems to include Jamie Lynn. And if that's the case, and Britney's willing to swear in court for that, I'm less likely to believe an Instagram live video as I am a court testimonial. Now, obviously, I couldn't do an actual read on Britney during that because of two factors. One, I wasn't there. Two, it was audio. It's very hard to do that. Actually, three factors. You know what? Let's add a third, and that is that it was fully scripted. So if that's the case, that makes it difficult, if not impossible, to do an analysis on that. And Jamie Lynn had enough red flags that it seems as though she's just covering her butt during this time in regards to her actions towards her sister. Now, this is based partially on my opinion, because as I said, the science of nonverbal communication only shows that she was aggressive, that she was defensive, and that she had negative emotions centered around the reaction from the audience. That's all that we could really for sure see. We have no luxury of asking questions after that or probing deeper with Jamie. Maybe someday we will. Maybe someday that will actually be able to happen, but probably not for some time. So that's my opinion on this situation. If you disagree, or you do agree, or you have a similar or different opinion, or any opinion on this situation, just let me know in the comments below. I do believe that things are going to start hopefully getting better for Britney. They seem to be getting steadily better, but not fully better, and I can understand her wanting to just have a little bit of her life back. I do highly suggest that you go and listen to that audio. It's very good to be able to hear Britney speak in her tone. It's not a stage voice. It's not a voice on some sort of medication. It sounds as if it's her actual voice. She's been a singer and a performer for years. She sounds tired, but she sounds like her, and that's good to hear. And you can hear her use some of her own vocabulary and some of her own mental processing in this script. Possibly, maybe somebody else wrote it for her, but that doesn't seem to be the case in this specific incident. So I do suggest you go and check that out. It's very eye-opening. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and hit the like button. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell notification if you would like to see the videos earlier or see the live streams. You've heard all this spiel from everybody else, so just copy and paste that from any other video on the internet. If you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments below. I will leave a comment at the very top that's pinned, so you can leave it under there, and that will help me keep track of it. Otherwise, helpful suggestions just get lost in the comments and I have trouble finding them. So that'll be an easy way to do that. I'm going to start doing that more often when I can in videos. So leave a comment under my comment about what you would like to see next. I do believe that we have some more YouTube drama coming up, some true crime, some reality TV kind of stuff. There's a lot coming down the pipe here, so I hope you're excited for that. I know I am, but without further ado, that's all that I've got for today. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.